So my wife ran for office and her mom didn't have a plan to vote. And luckily we checked in with her, but like 2 days before the election day, she was like, oh, I didn't want to stress you out. I was going to try and figure it out, but I couldn't, somebody couldn't. And we were like, I was like, I'll just take you. No, I will take you to go vote for your daughter. Like, are you kidding me? But like, you will be surprised if you do not ask to make sure people have a plan. It's a weird Tuesday. It's not like, it's different. And people have a rhythm to their lives. They don't make time to vote unless you tell them to make time to go vote.
Hi, I'm Akia, Operations Manager at NDTC. If you find this training helpful, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. And if you want to dive deeper into this topic, check out the description for more free campaign resources. Thanks for watching.
Hello, welcome everyone. Welcome to our July Trainer Talks. And if you're on a campaign, you're probably thinking about GOTV right about now, which is why we have convened this panel of experts to talk about GOTV strategy, universe, all that good stuff. If you haven't started thinking about it yet, it's not too late. You came to the right talk to get you started. And we have three people who I am excited to moderate this conversation today. I know I will learn things. I'm sure you all will learn things. But before we jump into that conversation and I let them introduce themselves, I wanted to let you know who I am and a little bit of housekeeping. So my name is Allie McRaith. I'm the Trainer Engagement Manager at the National Democratic Training Committee. If you found us, you know that we provide free trainings for Democrats all across the country. One of them being this panel with trainers. Our trainers are the ones who you've probably seen in trainings and bring these trainings to life. And I have the unique pleasure and honor of managing the trainers. We have 100+ trainers at NDTC. These are three of them. And so I get to work with them every day, or a sampling of those 100 every day. And so I'm happy to be in this conversation today. Okay, with that, without further ado, I would love to hear from our three panelists for today. We are going to go in alphabetical order, which starts with Jordan. That's all I know. I can't do the alphabet that quickly, but I think that starts with Jordan. So Jordan, if you could introduce yourself and also explain in your own words what GOTV is and why it is so important to you, and then we'll go and Lacey and then Nancy. Okay, thank you.
So hi everyone, my name is Jordan Berg Powers. I use he, him. I'm coming to you from Massachusetts. I am the C4 executive director of the C4 organization, Massachusetts. So I run an organization called Mass Alliance, where I've been for the last 12 years. Our organization helps elect and support candidates on all levels of government, from really small all the way up to larger offices. Before I came to Mass Alliance, I worked on congressional campaigns and senator campaigns and a short stint on a presidential campaign. So I've had the pleasure of working across a bunch of campaigns. And GOTV, or Get Out the Vote, is the difference between winning or losing. I have lost races because of a bad GOTV, and I have won races because a few extra votes made the difference. So GOTV is really where all of the work, all of the prep, all the stuff you do comes into play about whether or not you're going to win or lose.
Thank you, Jordan. I think I'm next. So hello, everyone. I'm Lacey Connelly. I use she, her pronouns. And today I am in my beautiful home state of West Virginia, where currently I work for my local municipal government. So I'm in City Hall every day working with the mayor and the city council, elected representatives. So really the small government is where my heart is right now. But I got my start working in presidential politics in Iowa. I've worked on races up and down the ballot. Before I took this position with my municipality, I was the caucus director for the House Democrats here in West Virginia. So all levels of campaigns at the end of the day come down to your GOTV efforts, because getting out the vote means you are making sure that the people you know are going to support your candidates actually get to the polling location or turn in their early ballot or mail in whichever method of early voting or voting they choose to do, you're making sure your supporters are doing that. And you're trying not to turn out the other person's voters. So we will probably talk about that as we go in, but just, very basics, get out the vote is the absolute most important piece of this. So, and I will toss it down to Nancy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nancy Leeds, use she, her pronouns. I am dialing in from Washington, D.C. today. Right now, I am the Vice President of Mail Programs at Voter Participation Center, where we register and mobilize members of the New American Majority. But I have been working in this space and on the ground on campaigns for the past 16 years, everywhere from California to Iowa to Arkansas, and everything from city council to presidential. Last cycle, I was the coordinated campaign director for the Minnesota DFL, so Minnesota's Democratic Party, and helped eke out a win there. What GOTV means to me, agree with everything Lacey and Jordan said. I will also say, as a person who started my career in field and spent a lot of my career in field, GOTV is really exciting to me because that's the time when all of our work comes to fruition and all of these ideas that we've been collecting, we get to act upon them. And it's also the time where field is kind of in charge of the campaign and really the engine driving it. So I love that, but with great power comes great responsibility. So it also means a lot of planning on our parts.
Yes, I was going to say, if you are on a campaign that is big enough to have multiple departments and multiple staffers right now, this is the time when everyone has to come do field and knock some doors and make phone calls. And it truly is one of the best times. So thank you all for being here to speak about that today. So let's start with sort of the basics. And Jordan, thank you for clarifying our lingo that we're going to use a lot today. GOTV is get out the vote. And it is a very crucial acronym in campaign world. So if you haven't heard it, that is what it means. Or if you've wondered and haven't wanted to ask what it means, that's what it means. So let's start with the basics. What is the foundation for launching a successful GOTV effort? And this is an open question to anyone who wants to jump in.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and kick off. I think one of the most important things, and it ties into the just overall preparation that Nancy was talking about, is data. Your get out the vote efforts are going to come down to data. And I think a lot of times when we talk about when the GOTV portion of your campaign should be beginning, we get into these X number of weeks before election day or early vote or whatever. But I think that getting out the vote starts the day you make your first phone call or you knock your first door and you put that data into the van and minivan. Because if you know that someone is a strong supporter right off the bat, you're going to turn them out. If you know that they are a strong opposition right off the bat, you don't waste your time and resources on them anymore. And then if they're anywhere in that in-between area, that's where your field team, your communications team, your candidate has work to do to get you towards that GOTV goal of knowing that you have enough votes to win your election before 12:05 the day after election day. So data is the number one thing that comes to my mind when I think of get out the vote efforts.
Just say the other, for me, the most important thing is I'm a big believer in visualization. So I visualize the day. I think about, whenever I start in the campaign, I want to visualize what does a successful election day look like? What will it look like when my campaign wins? And inevitably, you do not have that at this moment. Almost never do you have that sort of even weeks or months before election day. But visualizing it helps you then fill in those gaps. If you're not thinking about it, and for me, thinking about it isn't enough, I want to literally see what it looks like, because then I can ask important questions like, is my space the right space to have people come in? Normally when people are canvassing, you have 5 people, 6 people come in. GOTV, hopefully you have 100 people or lots of people coming through. Is this the right space? Is there parking? Do I have the things I need? Do I have somebody to help out, right? All of the questions sort of come in. So I'm a big believer in visualizations. And the other, I just want to echo what Lacey said and say, yes, I 1,000% agree. I think GOTV starts today if it hasn't started. It starts as soon as you start campaigning. It's, if you are asking people to come on a certain day, like a Tuesday, that's a weird day. They probably have to take off work. So you got to ask them now. You got to give them time, right? So, there's lots of places where you want people to plan out. Likely because most of us have now some sort of staggered voting of some sort, you have other milestones you want to hit. You need people to plan to take off. You need to let people know those are important dates, what they're doing around those. So the more time you have to prep, the better. But I'm a big believer in sort of visualization. Visualize what it'll look like to be successful. I just absolutely believe in it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think my answer would have been really similar to Jordan's, but I would frame it as planning, right? Like you over prepare. And that is everything from both the data side, like figuring out early, how many votes do I need to win this election? And what is my plan to turn them out? And how many passes do I need to turn them out? And how many volunteers do I need to make that many passes of voter contact? Like how many calls do I need to make to recruit all those volunteers? So doing all of that planning out, and then the logistical planning, like if we need vans, like the driving kind of vans, not the vote builder kind of van, to get people around, who is renting those? Are they 25? Where are we picking them up? Who's allowed to drive them? Do we need water? What is our number if the polls close or if the polls aren't open? And then another thing to think about is also doing some dry runs so that you are answering any questions you've forgotten or they're coming up before day of, because you can't fix those problems on November 9th.
Yeah. And if the people on this call, if your experience with GOTV has been maybe a volunteer in those last 4 days, hopefully what you're starting to hear is that there is a lot of work and planning and preparation that went into those last 4 days being a success. And so now if you're on the other side where you're the one trying to think through those decisions and make that experience happen for the volunteers and for your staff, it's a totally different ballgame, right? It's a lot more planning. Thank you for clarifying VAN. We've used VAN, the acronym for the Voter Activation Network, NGP. You've probably heard the lingo. If it's not in VAN, it doesn't exist. That's what Lacey's saying with the data. And if you don't have access to VAN, that's okay. It needs to be in a spreadsheet. It needs to live somewhere. You need to document your voter contact, right? And it could be as simple as a spreadsheet, depending on the scale of your campaign and your race. So we are not saying you need VAN. Don't let that be your takeaway. But your takeaway needs to be that you need to track those conversations and those data points so that you do know who to go back to and turn out. So you're not turning out the wrong people. So thank you all. You touched on a couple things that I'm gonna throw a couple questions out and you can take your answers where you want. And this connects to a question Joseph just asked, where Joseph says, I'm running for a public office that has a cap on campaign spending. What GOTV efforts will give me the best bang for the limited bucks? Which is obviously a very layered question. But my next question was going to be, are there resources or tactics that are more important than others? And if, in your opinion, there are, what sorts of considerations do you do? And in Joseph's case, obviously, budget is the big one for that race. So anyone want to take on kind of how to choose which resources and tactics to use for their GOTV efforts?
So I'll just say doors at call time. There is nothing better than 18th century technology of putting on some shoes and knocking on your voters. It is the gold standard. Just having a conversation with people. So that is hopefully going to not cost you a lot. Maybe the cost if you need to of the literature, but you should already have literature because you're already door knocking. So you can just bring that back out. Say today's the day, or tomorrow's the day, or Tuesday's the day, however far apart you start out your GOTV. But you really, if I were going to start with the number one thing to do, it's to talk to people. It's to systematically talk to your voters. And that usually costs the time of your volunteers, so you're not paying them, right? Most of the campaigns that I'm a part of, state rep campaigns, they're tiny campaigns. You're not paying a lot of staff, right? And you have maybe not limits because of the law, but you have limits because it's a lower race and there isn't unlimited funds. And so the thing that you can, the thing that I always say that makes a difference in the campaigns that I help with is that we work harder on the doors. Like that's always the thing that makes the difference. So if I were to give one advice for your time, your energy, it's to figure out how to talk to all of the people who have said they're going to go vote for you between the time you start and election day, and make sure they have a plan to go vote.
Yeah, absolutely. And building on that, so there's 3 resources that we use in campaigns, right? We use money, we use time, and we use our people. And so if your monetary resources are limited by spending caps, then I think it's worth it for you to build the other 2 resources. And the best way to build the resource that you're going to need for GOTV is to invest your time in building your volunteers. And so that's going to give you more people, which is going to let you do that person-to-person contact more effectively, more efficiently. And if you're following the data that you have been collecting, then you know exactly where that resource of people need to go. Like, you know, the neighborhoods where your supporters live, you know, the houses where your supporters live. So go to those houses and get them out to vote. So my best bang for your buck is investing your time in building your volunteer capacity.
Could not agree more with Jordan and Lacey. I just have a couple of cherries to put on that sundae. So one thing is, I just wanted to, for folks who may have been on other NDTC trainings or just familiar with different parts of the campaign. So when we talk about call time in this context, we're talking about staff and volunteers and maybe the candidate contacting donors, asking them for their votes, which is different than when a candidate does call time and asks for money. So I just wanted to make that clarification. The other thing that is almost implied by this, but I will just say out loud, the thing that is not GOTV nor volunteering is yard signs. So I think that is a thing that people think, oh, these are cheap, and so I can get these during GOTV. I would honestly say you're better spending that money on paper to print out walk lists or clipboards or extra cell phones for your volunteers or sandwiches for your volunteers. So I just want to be super, super clear on that point as it comes up. But 100% agree. Doors, call time, investing in your people so that they can be great messengers and invested messengers for you.
Thank you all. And I want to just clarify that GOTV is also about sometimes getting that low hanging fruit, right? Like tallying off the votes that are automatic votes for you. Family, hopefully family, is an automatic vote for you. Maybe they're very, you ask them, if they were going to support your race early on, friends, things like that. Donors also are people, if they have invested in your campaign, they want to see you succeed. But I've worked in campaigns. I almost didn't vote 2 weeks ago in Chicago. No one made a plan. And then Tuesday rolled around and I was like, oh my gosh, polls close in 25 minutes. I got to hurry my butt over there. And I was so ashamed of myself. And you know what? It happens to the best of us. People need a plan to go vote. They need to be hard asked. They need to say, are you going today or tomorrow? And so you cannot assume, we know the acronym of what happens when you assume something. You cannot assume someone is voting for you, even if it's your mom, even if it's your donor who gave you $1,000. They need to be treated like everyone else, and you need to make a plan with them, or your volunteers need to make a plan with them. So that is just to really draw out that importance. Jordan, I see you piping up, please.
Yeah, I just want to highlight, I worked on a campaign, I'm not ashamed to say, when I was younger, and I missed a vote. I was working on the campaign and then I never made time for myself to vote. And then it was 7:50 and I was like, oh no. I just forgot.
And guess what? If the margin was 1 vote, you would never forgive yourself. You would
on the
never
other side of the
forgive yourself.
Just to your point about, so my wife ran for office and her mom didn't have a plan. She didn't have a plan to vote. And luckily we checked in with her, but 2 days before the election day, she was like, oh, I didn't want to stress you out. I was going to try and figure it out, but I couldn't, somebody couldn't. And we're like, I was like, I'll just take, I will take you to go vote for your daughter. Like, are you kidding me? But like, you will be surprised if you do not ask to make sure people have a plan. It's a weird Tuesday. It's not like, it's different. And people have a rhythm to their lives. They don't make time to vote unless you tell them to make time to go vote.
Yeah. Nancy, I see you came off mute too. You want to pipe up here?
Yeah, I mean, I think Jordan sort of got at what I was saying toward the tail end, which is just that, like, I'm sure you've heard on so many of these trainings, like, we're weird. We think about this all the time. But it's really like, it's not that people don't want to, or they think that they're not going to vote. But it's like something came up, like, oh, it was raining and I can't walk there anymore. Or, oh, crap, I knew that was coming up, but I didn't know it was today. So even people who are your strong supporters still need to be mobilized. You still want to check in and say, do you have a plan? And then call during early vote. Have you voted? Or if you get those returns, check and see if they voted.
Yes. Thank you. So we talked a little bit too about timing, and the sort of, there isn't a magic day that GOTV starts. And I think people always want that answer of when it starts, but when should GOTV typically start, right? Lacey, you already said from the very beginning, which I think the point here is that your GOTV plan needs to underpin all of your campaign planning. It is not a little add-on puzzle piece you do at the very end. So GOTV should be part of the framework from the very beginning. But when do these mobilization, get out the vote efforts really start? And then how does early voting or vote by mail sort of change this? Given obviously different states have different deadlines and timelines and things like that.
I can pipe in and fill the silence. And I'm sure Lacey and Jordan have a lot to fill in here too. So I think it depends what you mean by GOTV, which is sort of a cop-out answer. So when you start mobilizing voters, I would say you're going to start with your field efforts to mobilize voters maybe a week before early vote starts. But the field efforts of talking to voters, again, that goes back to planning. Well, how many volunteers do I need to have recruited for that? Have I cut these universes? Do I have all these plans? So the planning should start, like, the best time to have started planning is yesterday, and the second best time is right now. And then I would say another consideration in terms of timing is if you do have a long early vote period, like Minnesota and North Carolina have 45-day early vote periods at this point. So how are you using your staff and your campaign's time? And what is the balance between doing things like persuasion canvassing and GOTV canvassing, and making sure that you have a plan to handle those two universes separately? Because I do think, there are times when you're doing sort of like persuabilization, where it's like, this person should be with us. We think they're with us. We don't know. And so we're going to ID them and then turn them out. But generally, you're going to have a different message. So you have to be cognizant of, if you're doing those things simultaneously, training your volunteers if they're knocking two different kinds of voters or having different canvases. So thinking through all that. But GOTV starts right as early vote begins, even if early vote begins real early.
Yeah. And I also think, especially this year, and me thinking specifically here in West Virginia, that the earlier we start to inform our voters about how they can vote in this coming election, the better. Because for us here in West Virginia in 2020, since we were still in the middle of everything, our state allowed people to do no excuse absentee voting for the first time ever. You didn't have to have a doctor's excuse. You didn't have to be on vacation. Everybody got mailed their ballot, and everybody was able to return it if they wanted to. This year, the state isn't doing that. So if there are voters for our people who are expecting to get their ballot in the mail, who then don't get it in the mail, and they haven't made a plan, well, whose job was it to inform them that they weren't going to be getting a ballot in the mail? It was us and our candidates. So when you are thinking of GOTV and turning your people out, part of the consideration that needs to go into that and the education of your voters is making sure they know how they can vote. So can they vote by mail? Maybe they can have an absentee ballot in West Virginia if they have certain thresholds for an excuse, or maybe there's early voting. Where is their early voting location? We just had redistricting too. So that's going to add a nice little puzzle piece as to people whose precincts may have changed. So again, this is going back to the planning. It's also going back to the GOTV is not just the final 3 weeks, 4 weeks of your election campaign. So making sure that you're thinking about these things and informing your voters as soon as possible.
Yeah, I think also, yes. And when I think about it, the other piece I'm thinking about is what are the resources that I have to accomplish my GOTV goals? So part of the other thing I'm thinking about is just my volunteer capacity. And so one of the things when I'm talking to campaigns, they'll say like, oh, when should we start? And I'll say, well, how long will it take you to talk to all the people you need to talk to? Because if you need more time because you have a bunch of people, it's a large place, you need to start earlier to make sure that you have enough time to get to every person. And so oftentimes, and especially in this time with early voting, you're going to be doing two things at the same time. You're still going to be talking to people, trying to convince them to vote for your candidate. And you're going to be doing this process of informing your voters about their voting opportunities, about what their rules are, about like trying to make sure they go vote, right? You're going to be getting out the vote and getting people to vote for your candidate at the same time. And so you need to then plan your volunteers accordingly. The more you door knock, the more you make phone calls, the more you know what your volunteer capacity is, right? So the more work you do, the more prepared you are for GOTV, which it then goes back to the things that Lacey and Nancy and I are all saying, which is just like, this really is an ongoing process all the time, right? Like the work that you're doing for field, that then informs your GOTV because you'll know what you have the capacity to do and can't do. So I think about, I tell people like, start off, like definitely you need to get people to go vote. So there is a cutoff time you need to do, but start thinking about like, how long will it take me to talk to them at least twice to remind them to go vote, and then plan accordingly.
Yes. And I want to add a couple things here that Nancy and Lacey and Jordan have said that I want to just sort of debunk for people who might be feeling overwhelmed by the amount of math that seems to be all of a sudden popping up. So we have at NDTC, we have a volunteer sort of capacity worksheet where you can sort of plug in different numbers of like, okay, if I have 10 volunteers that are each going to do a shift, and my volunteers are used to a shift being 3 hours or 2 hours, right? So it sort of depends what you've been sort of letting your volunteers expect, right? So if your volunteers are good with a 4-hour shift, great news for you. Like that's great for GOTV. If they're good for 2-hour shifts, maybe for GOTV, you really need to try and get them to do a Saturday and a Sunday shift so that they can do both days. And again, when you have volunteers that are bought into your campaign that have already put that in time investment, they're going to want to see you win. So they will be very galvanized for GOTV. And that is really the ask of GOTV shifts is this huge urgency. So that's one thing that if you're not sure how to calculate volunteer capacity, which can be sort of a nebulous thing to calculate, and we do have worksheets to help you there, but you have to sort of have your own data from your own campaign ready to use. You have to have kind of the number of volunteers you think you have and the shift hours and things like that. And if you don't have them, that worksheet can sort of help you shape your numbers and set a goal for yourself of like, okay, I need 10 volunteers. Okay, great. That can be my goal. The other thing that I don't think this term was used, but it's called backwards mapping. So you're backwards mapping from election day. We have a worksheet for that and it's free. So it's very easy to backwards map because you have election day and that is not a movable deadline. And that is what the end goal is that day. So you can backwards map with shifts, which days if you're running phone banks on Tuesdays and Thursdays, you need, 8 weeks of Tuesdays and Thursdays to get all of those shifts accounted for. And if you realize that you don't have 8 weeks anymore, okay, then I need to add a phone bank, a third day of phone banking. So it sort of like helps sort of shape out what you need to do. So backwards mapping and capacity calculation worksheets, which I think Rhoda can or will drop. Sorry for putting you on the spot there, Rhoda. She'll find them. We also have a search bar on our website where you can search these things. The other thing that I want to mention is that to sort of combine something, and I asked in the chat because I just wanted to see where people were at when we say things like universe, if you understand what we mean when we're saying universe. So that's the universe of voters that you're trying to talk to. And there's definitely a Venn diagram and some overlap between your GOTV universe and your persuasion universe. And obviously people that you've gotten a yes or a tentative yes from in your persuasion universe, you definitely need to bring over to your vote to your GOTV universe, which is, again, to connect to Lacey's very first point, I think, that was said on this whole panel, is why you need to track those conversations and that data, because even if you have the most detail-oriented brain, you will not remember every conversation you have on a campaign. You just won't. You need to write it down. And this also might, I'm in Illinois. I know the day that the Secretary of State pulls over early voting record into the voter file. So that's a big day in my mind when then I'm updating my universe, because then I can remove people that have already voted. So there's a constant sort of, you have to figure out in your own state what is happening so that you can constantly be iterating and using your limited time, money, and people most effectively to win your race. So we are here to help. And that's what all we're saying kind of all comes together. It's all very connected pieces. So I just wanted to make that very clear, that we have additional things to help you if some of these things are feeling still a little bit nebulous. That is what we're here for. We have a lot of GOTV training sessions coming up later this month, which Rhoda can drop to our event page too, so you can sign up for some of those. But let's, I have another question for you guys. Where do campaigns typically go wrong for GOTV, and what are some sort of rules of the road or guidelines from your experience that we could give people to help not repeat those mistakes?
I have some good ones, but the one of the things that people say all the time on campaigns, which is wrong, is they'll say like, "Oh, you shouldn't say your opponent's name." And this is one of the dumb things. And so people then don't know what's at stake. Elections are about what's at stake. I can vote for this person or not that person. And so we wrote a script in English and we asked some people to translate it. And in the translation, the other person's name wasn't mentioned. And so we got to GOTV and we were turning out voters, and somebody said to me, and I speak a little bit of the language, and so I was doing GOTV with it, and the person asked me in Spanish, can I vote for both of these people? And I was like, no, you get to vote for one of these people. And I had this moment, I'm gonna say about halfway through the day, where I was like, oh no, we're turning out all these people, and they are going to the polls either not sure who they're voting for or not going to vote for our candidate. And we ended up turning out the wrong people. So it's really important that people know what's at stake in an election. And also, when you're doing it, make sure that you're actually turning out your voters and not your opponent voters. And again, that's a data in. So to Lacey's point, make sure that everyone understands why we're asking the questions we're asking, and make sure the data coming in is good. Because if you have bad data, then you're going to be turning out your opponent's voters. And so that election was down. We ended up losing it by like 200 votes. And I am certain that if we had done it correctly, and it had been translated correctly, and all the things moved, like we could have won that race. And it was really like we also had to stop GOTV, right? Like we were in the middle of the day, and I was like, stop, everyone stop. We need to start calling people and figuring out who is where and where. Like we had to actually, it wasn't just that then we were turning out the wrong people. We had to stop GOTVing because we didn't want to turn out more of our opponent's voters.
Yeah, similar. And it digs into the data that I've been talking about the entire time, which is that it's not just any data that you're relying on when it gets to GOTV. It is the data that you personally, your volunteers, your staff members have collected. So here in West Virginia, in the 2018 and 2020 elections, when I was working with the House caucus, we are perpetually about 15 years behind in any data that we have. And so we were starting to get data on the likely people who were likely to vote Democrat versus people who were likely to vote Republican. And a lot of our candidates were using that for their turnout universes because they hadn't been collecting the data. They hadn't been putting it into the van, despite my best efforts. And what we found out, and we've seen this here in West Virginia, is there is a sea change of people who are still registered as Democrats because they've always been registered as Democrats because of the strong union presence that we've had in the past, but they're voting for Republicans. So our candidates were turning out likely Democratic voters because they were registered as Democrats and they vote in every election. And they were turning out and voting for Republicans because our candidates weren't reaching out and saying, are you going to vote for me? Are you going to vote for this person? So when we talk about data, there's a lot of great data sources. There's a lot of different places in the campaign to use that data and use those sources. But when it comes to the time to turn out your voters, the best data that you can rely on is what you have collected yourself.
Big agree with both of those. GOTV is a calculator, right? Like you're getting out what you're putting in. Two mistakes I thought of over the course of this. So one is not coordinating. So different states have different rules about with whom you can coordinate. But if you are running in a state that has Democrats, a Democratic slate from the top to the bottom of the ticket, like pool your resources. Some places do this with a formal coordinated campaign, but especially if you're somewhere where there's not a big statewide, but maybe there is a state Senate and 2 state rep campaigns and some city council campaigns, like think about bringing your resources together. Think about sharing data. Think about sharing your IDs and having all of your volunteers go to all of your doors. So maximizing your resources rather than having 3 campaigns canvassing the same precinct at the same time. And then another mistake I would say is not preparing, which I know I've talked a lot about planning. And I think preparing is a little bit different. And what I mean that planning is like thinking through what you're going to need. Preparing is having everything ready to accomplish it. So what you don't want is for it to be a cluster bumble when your volunteers get to your staging location, which is where you're going to launch a GOTV canvas out of, wherever that may be. And it's like, okay, wait, how did we organize these turfs? What are our priorities? This person who's in charge of the staging location is like, oh, someone has a question, I don't know the answer. Like putting in the effort to not only think through things, but make sure that you've had every conversation with your volunteer leaders, that people know what number to call, that you have check-in times and that those are being executed, which is why I think GOTV dry runs are so important, so that you're making those mistakes before it's the critical day.
Yes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I just want to agree really quickly with Nancy and say that like most of the GOTV problems I run into are actually just simple things like, oh, we didn't think about how many people were going to need to park, and people are getting tickets, or they can't stop here, so they're just circling the block and they're wasting time circling the block. Mm-hmm. Or I didn't think about the fact that it was going to be 45 minutes to get from the where we sent them to where they need to come back to. Could we have figured out a better system? Or the printer is broken and we were planning paper. Or I always, for example, especially on a November election, mostly now we use minivan and we don't print out anything. The only time I'm printing lists at this point is on election day, because I've had plenty of experience with it going down and then us looking around with each other. And so I want to be able to have a paper backup for election day, especially November election day when everybody in the country's on it, so that, we can hit the ground running. So we can, if something goes down, don't worry about it. Hit the paper. Like we're going to do that real quick. So, the most common things that happen are actually really small things that if you had done a dry run, to Nancy's point, you could have picked up.
Yeah. The dry run is like your dress rehearsal. If there's any theater folks out there, it's like you have to make sure that the cues, it's a well coordinated event, because like what Jordan was just walking through, those might not seem like big things, but if someone can't find parking and they're driving around the block for 40 minutes, well, one, I probably wouldn't even spend 40 minutes doing that, but that means your flake rate is going to be really high. The flake rate, meaning the number of volunteers who flake or don't show up, which means all of your organizer math, which you do account for some level of flake rate, but if it's even higher than what you've accounted for, you have shifts that then you're in a bind and you need to make up somehow. And when it's 3 days till election day, there's not a lot of time to make that up. And so those little things can easily become very big stressors. So the most that you can, mitigate those ahead of time, the better you will be. I have one more question for you all, and then I'm going to shift to the Q&A box where we have some questions from the audience. But there is a question. Yeah, Nancy, I see your message. Do you want to talk a little bit more about a dry run quickly before I pivot?
Sure. Yeah, it just occurred to me that folks might not be familiar with what we mean when we say a dry run. So I will go through it quickly. This is obviously something Jordan is also passionate about. So anyone feel free to interrupt me. But essentially a dry run is like it's a dress rehearsal. It's running like you're running election day. So if you're going to be launching canvases out of multiple locations that you don't usually use, if you're going to have volunteers who are responsible for leading canvases and reporting in numbers, like you do everything as if it is election day, you can still be canvassing. So I think like that's something I want to mention. This is not time that you're taking away from earlier efforts in the campaign. You can be doing GOTV for early vote if you have a long early vote period, or you can even be doing persuasion, and that'll be the one thing that's different. But it's essentially running everything as if polls are closing that night, so that you can smooth out any hiccups along the way. I don't know if anyone has anything else I missed.
Yeah, one thing that I'll add to that is it would be a best practice to do your dry run on a weekday and not on a weekend.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, another thing that from experience, one time the Wi-Fi did not work at a staging location we were just using for GOTV, right? It wasn't our normal field office. We were using it for dry run. So we learned luckily in the dry run that if 10 people are phone banking on this Wi-Fi, it is not going to work. And then what do you do with the volunteers who do not want to canvass and there's no data to enter and literally no one can use the dialer or make calls because it's not working? That's kind of a big problem where you have 10 volunteers who can't fulfill their shift. Luckily, we figured it out in a dry run that was happening 2 weeks before the election day, so we could make a plan and sort it out. Usually you should have 2 dry runs, actually. I think Nancy maybe mentioned that too, but you can try one on a weekend, one on a weekday, things like that. So definitely do at least 1 dry run, if not 2. So something that has come up, I think, a lot in our different answers to these questions is just how crucial volunteers are for all of field, basically, but especially for GOTV, right? If you've heard, every answer has involved some element of volunteers. This is not a moment where you can do it yourself. There's rarely those moments in campaigns, to be honest, but this is really one of those moments. So what are some effective ways that you've found candidates and staff can really mobilize and keep their volunteers engaged consistently through election day?
I use the 2 things. One is, I let them know that this is the work that they've put in. I think a lot of times people who do this work, they think of it as like, oh, this is like a secret thing. But I let people know, when my wife ran, our win number was directly behind us and how close we were to it. Everyone knew all the time what the goal of the campaign was to get to that win number. And so, I think that's the piece, is just to like let them in on that, let them know what needs to happen, and then remind them that like this is it. This is what we've built to. The sort of my old boss liked to do like the St. Crispin speech, like we happy few, like that's like just like really inspire people to like, this is what we're here for. Like don't be scared to just like rally people and like have one of those moments.
Yeah, I think giving people, as Jordan said, like giving people context as to why you're asking them to do this stuff, because it's definitely a stretch or a pain sometimes for people to be making calls to strangers or to even people they know or knocking on doors. So making sure that you're really investing in volunteers so that they understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. And they're very well resourced. They have answers to frequently asked questions. They know what to do when things go up. They've done a role play in a training, like really make people feel valued and as if they're integral to the campaign, because they are. And then also, I would say you want to be moving people up the ladder of engagement throughout your whole campaign. Like what you don't want to do is be cold calling your volunteer list, looking for staging location directors, so people to run those satellite offices. You want someone who has been a super volunteer, and then you had them bring their friends in, and then they helped train people, and then they led a phone bank, so that people have been invested in all along the way. You know, we talk about organizing voters as like, we want to have a relational relationship rather than a transactional relationship, but the same thing is true with your volunteers. You don't want to just be like, okay, 2 weeks ago, you were 2 weeks out, you're a good Democrat, so come on in. You want to be building a relationship so that you have a great program, your data is strong, and your operation is strong.
Yeah. And just real quick to circle it back, I think, Nancy, to what you said about the core of GOTV for you is to make sure that it's fun as well. So the why definitely helps, being transparent about the goals that you're striving towards and where you are in meeting them, also important, and to continue to have fun with it. And so if you've done the planning ahead of time and if you've got all this information, then there should be enough space for people to breathe and to also enjoy what they're doing.
Yeah, I am not kidding when I say GOTV is my favorite holiday. Like the food, the sights, the sounds, the activities, and hopefully you're making it feel that way for your volunteers.
Yes. And as I think Nancy said this, Lacey, you echoed it. A thank you goes a long way, right? If someone completes a shift, your next contact with them should be a thank you before it's asking them to do another shift, right? And those little things really can go a long way to building a stronger relationship instead of it feeling transactional. And then the next time you look in your text thread and the next time is you ask them to do a shift 2 weeks later and you're like, oh, damn, I didn't thank them for doing that. So, just little things like that. It doesn't need to be you handwrite thank you notes to all your volunteers. Of course, that is something you could do if you have those volunteers that don't want to do voter contact. Maybe that's a good task for them to write thank you notes to fellow volunteers. So there's always work that you can do. Okay, we have a lot of questions coming into the Q&A box, specifically around kind of universe targeting and prioritization that I think we are not going to be able to get to in the next 12 minutes sufficiently. So we have a course that helps you think through the questions and dependencies that you need to think through, because universe creation and prioritization is really dependent on your district and your resources. And if you have coordinated support from like a state party or another campaign, all of these things are really important factors in your universe. So unfortunately, I'm going to put a tiny bit of a pin in those questions, but we do have a question from Steve that I'm going to read aloud, and then I would love for anyone to weigh in, and I'm going to add a little addendum to it. So Steve is a volunteer for Navajo County Democrats and also does lots of work for Northeast Arizona Native Democrats. We have 3 main sovereign lands in our area. In the 2020 cycle, Biden won by less than the amount of increase in the Native vote. So does anyone have any experience doing GOTV on tribal lands? And one of the questions that I also had was, does GOTV shift at all in red districts? So in these sort of districts where maybe it's not as cut and dry as canvassing and all the houses are right on city streets that are very easy to canvass and easily accessible for volunteers. Does anyone have any experience doing GOTV on tribal lands or in red districts or more rural districts that they might be able to offer some strategies and tactics for people?
So I haven't done GOTV on tribal lands. I did do some consulting with a campaign that depended on tribal votes for field. And so Mostly, I think we encourage people to work with trusted partners. Somebody has done work to increase those voters, to get those voters, find out who those partners are or who those leaders in those communities are, have those conversations early. It is better if it comes from trusted community leaders and people who are invested in those communities, not just for the election cycle, than it is to try to sort of pop in and create it. So that's how I would work with them. I would try to find out who those people are, who those leaders are, and say, what do you need to be successful? How can we support you? How can volunteers come help you? Like, what do you need to be successful? And that's how I would approach that conversation. When I turned 18, we moved to rural Pennsylvania I was a city kid, younger, and I moved to rural Pennsylvania where I voted for the first time. And I can say doing GOTV in sort of red areas, rural areas, it's really important to do that work, to ask people to go vote, to sort of squeeze the lemon of every vote where you can, if you have the capacity. And you'd be surprised, people are really, if you are a Democrat in a red area, you're usually fired up. So I also always put on the script to ask them if they want to volunteer, because giving them a chance to talk to other Democrats, they're like, yes, please. Oh my God, I haven't talked to somebody who doesn't believe that people are secretly lizards in weeks. So I'd love to have that conversation. So I think that I always try to ask people to be involved, because they're usually, if you're a Democrat in a red place, you are a Democrat for sure.
Yeah, and I'm going to build on that too. Visibility is so important. And the visibility of having people be strong, proud Democrats in red states. I know that over the past 4 years, when I've been back home in West Virginia and I've been working on different campaigns, I have literally talked to neighbors who say, I don't think I want to actually organize my neighborhood because I'm the only Democrat here. I'm like, that's funny, because I just talked to the person right across the street from you. They're a Democrat too, and they're afraid to say that they're a Democrat. So there's definitely something to be said for not writing off places and for actually making the calls, finding out where your supporters are, and then getting them to stand up and be visible in their communities. And I think the same thing goes too when we're talking about GOTV and canvassing in general in rural places. Because I know that I've gotten votes for candidates in North Dakota because I was the first person that ever showed up on their doorstep to ask them for a vote. So again, this goes into the planning, and it goes into how much the resources that you have, how much time, how many people, but not writing off places because the houses are a little farther apart. Going up into some of the hollers here in West Virginia and having one person meet with you on their front porch, and then their neighbors see that and they all come, and all of a sudden you've got an impromptu house party. I think those things are important to think about when we're thinking about working in these red communities.
I can talk a little bit specifically about working on tribal lands, because that's something that we did in Minnesota, and something that my organization does a little bit. No one will be surprised to hear me say, I think cultural competency is so important. You want to go in and work to help invest in and empower the people who are already there and already have ties to those communities. And you want every reservation or every piece of sovereign land is going to be different. Different tribes are different, just tribal governments are their own things. So you want to make sure that you find supporters who are part of those communities, who can walk you through the nuances and be a surrogate for you in the campaign there. And also pay people who are doing essentially work for your campaign, in particular in communities that are more than marginalized, and have historically been intentionally disenfranchised. If you're sending someone to go organize in a place that is naturally, understandably going to be skeptical of outsiders coming in, and that's going to, again, it depends on the community, it's going to vary. Make sure that you are investing and giving them tools and resources to help lead. Another couple of things that I think are just important, again, I don't know what this looks like in Arizona, but that were important in Minnesota. So one is that a lot of people didn't have mailboxes. And so you want to think about mail and vote by mail? And is that actually a tactic you want to use? Do you want to have, organize an event where everyone comes together and puts their ballot in the drop box at the post office or the PO box that they all go to? Like, you might want to think a little more creatively about that. And then the other one is that sometimes the polling location is really far away. And so, like, I am not a person who generally in a city is going to talk about organizing rides to the polls. But I think maybe you do want to say, okay, do we have a plan to, get people, like, can we get a bus for everyone and take them all at the same time? Can we, during election day, have a van that's just circling around, or a bunch of vans? So thinking, like, what are the historical and cultural differences? And then what are just like logistical roadblocks as well?
Thank you, Nancy. Okay, one other question that I want us to get through. Oh, Lacey, I'm going to add you back to the spotlight. I don't know what happened. Okay. No, you're fine. So for a statewide campaign that has been mostly done social media, emptied its coffers to win the runoff, I've counseled the candidate to first raise the money to mail a postcard to the voter target universe and get name recognition going. She only has volunteer staff. What are your thoughts? Quick, rapid fire thoughts from anyone. Mine would be invest in volunteers, not a postcard. And I'm seeing some head nods.
I mean, I guess it's a yes and.
Yeah.
I think you should definitely be planning to talk to people. And I would want to, you should definitely plan to talk to people. And I would want to, if I could send mail, I always want to send mail. I also want to think about, can I get a Facebook ad up or something to get my name in front of Democrats, I'm guessing, in this case, really quickly? Like, are there some easy lifts? The good thing also about a good, well-placed Facebook ad is you can, if you tie it to an issue, you might get some money in and you might get some volunteer hours. So that's another piece. We did that for a campaign. We sort of got through the primary, spent down all our money. We used a little bit of money to do targeted ads to people who cared a lot about choice, and put money, like a little bit of money into that, and that built volunteer hours and a little bit of money back into the coffers because people were obviously fired up about choice. And so, we were like, we're fighting somebody who's bad on this to move to replace them. Volunteer with us, and we got some calls to volunteer. So I think, think about, like, what is it you want to do? How can you get your universe and all those things, and then spend your resources wisely.
And the caveat there that I would also just add is to our whole conversation today of being able to track the data. You can't really track people's reaction to the postcard and what they're going to do with it. So you're investing in something that isn't really trackable and therefore really useful to you. The last question before I'm going to close it out for final thoughts is something that I think, Lacey, you talked about a little bit happening in West Virginia. So I want to start with you, but how do we remove those Democrats in name only, the DINOs, from lists? Are there any ideas or additional filters that people can add to filter them out? Because it is definitely hard to build a universe when you have some of those. And I just learned this acronym. I had to Slack someone behind the scenes what a dino was, but I was like, are we talking about like older people? And that doesn't feel so kind. No. Okay. We're talking about Democrats in name only. So I learned something today, like I thought I would. Hopefully you all did too. Any helpful ideas?
A world where I didn't know where dinos were would be like, anyway, I deal with these people a lot. I use volunteer codes in the van to tag people, probably, honestly, activist code of dino. I would probably actually put that in there and then have them remove it. It's something that we do too with like bad mailing addresses, because when our Secretary of State updates the data that they send us for van updates, it automatically takes out anything that we have marked as a bad address. So I use the activist codes and I put bad address, and then I tell the candidates, when you're pulling your mail universe, make sure that you exclude anybody with this activist code. So I would do the same thing with the Democrats in name only.
Thank you. we are technically at the top of the hour, and I want to let each of you close out. This hour has flown by. I think I could have continued this conversation. I think you all could have continued this conversation. Hopefully this was helpful for everyone who joined us today as they start thinking through or continuing to think through your GOTV efforts. But if you had to leave one sentence of parting wisdom for everyone here today, what would that sentence be from each of you?
Don't complicate it. Just go talk to people on the doors. Tell them to go vote.
I would say plan ahead and invest in your volunteers.
I would say that data will save your sanity and have fun.
Those are all wonderful pieces of advice. Thank you all for joining. Rhoda and I both just dropped the survey one more time. Please, we have one response. I know we can do better than that. Please tell us how we did today so that we can continue iterating and bringing this programming forward for you all, because I personally love these conversations. And like I said, I always learn something. So hopefully you all were able to learn something or think about the next steps and where you're going to take your GOTV planning. Thank you again for joining us on this mid-July afternoon, and we will see you all hopefully at some NDTC programming soon.
Hi, I'm Sung Chung, a program associate on NDTC Staff Academy team. To keep learning, check out more of our training videos and sign up for our full catalog at traindemocrats.org. Thanks for watching.